Okay, in this third and final study, we're going to be looking at monochromatic and analogous mixing, the two other ways of darkening a color. So what I want you to do is you're going to create 6 chords or arrays or stripes divided into 7. How you measure it up, what size you do is entirely up to you. Again, like the other ones, you could just do dabs of paint in all these things. It doesn't matter to me. All I want to do is be able to see exactly what you're doing and have that be clear and communicable. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have 2 reds, 2 yellows, and 2 blues. For the red, we're going to be using cadmium red light. However, for the yellows and the blues, I want you to mix your 2 yellows together and your 2 blues together to get your basic yellow and your basic blue. But for this one, we're going to be working with just the cad red light. So what I want you to do is take some of the color and you're going to paint it in the middle box. Okay, just get it a little bit wet so it flows. And just kind of lay that down, pure cadmium red light. Again, like I said, I'm not too fussy about you being super neat. Like the other ones, if you're spending an hour getting your boxes super neat, you're putting your time and energy in the wrong place. So the middle box will have pure cadmium red light. And then what we're going to do is the top row is going to be, well, top row to me, I don't know what angle you're viewing it at, is going to be monochromatic, which means we're going to add black and white to the red. This is the traditional way that, well, not traditional, but the default way that most people think in terms of lightening and darkening a color. So we're going to take our red and we're going to make it darker with black, and we're going to make it lighter with white. In the second chord, what we're going to do is we're going to darken the red analogously. And that means by finding colors that are analogous to it on the color wheel, meaning same or similar. And so those are going to be the colors right next to it. So to darken red, we're going to head towards purple. And to lighten red, we're going to head towards orange. And we're going to do that by using pure color rather than black and white. All right, so I'm going to start by doing the white. When you add white to a color, it's technically referred to as a tint. When you add black, it's called a shade. When you add gray, it's called a tone. But in all my experience as a painter, I've never heard another painter use that language ever. Okay, so take a little bit of white, maybe a little bit more. What we're going to do is we're going to lighten it. Now, how light you go and how quickly, meaning how big are the jumps, is entirely up to you. It doesn't matter to me as long as you're going light. Whoops, a little bit of a dab there. Come around and get rid of that. Clean that up. And then we don't want to have too many streaks of different colors. So when you're mixing, mix it fairly well. And then we're going to add a bit more white. I'm going to start to get progressively lighter. And so you can see we're heading towards pink. And you'll know from the PowerPoint discussion that the undertone here in cadmium red light is orange. So even though this looks pink, if we were to make a pink with our other red, alizarin crimson, you would see a big difference between the 2 pinks. This would appear more salmon pink. The other one would be a little more violet pink, a cooler pink, so to speak. So I'm going to get a little bit more white. And that's really all you do here. It's pretty straightforward. We're doing this so we can see the difference between the different techniques of lightening and darkening colors. We've already seen the first technique, which is complementary mixing. So when we add our greens to our reds, we get these wonderful sort of earthy darks. moving towards brown. Okay, so that'll do for that. Clean your brush. Now clean your brush really well. You know, and you can see these two are more similar than these two. It doesn't matter as long as you're getting lighter. I don't want you to spend too much time, you know, making that a little bit lighter, things like that. In the second array, down here is the analogous. So we're going to lighten it by using orange. Now, in our basic color palette, we don't have orange. All right, so we're going to be working with the closest thing we have, which is a yellow. That's closest to orange, which is our cadmium yellow. All right, so you always go with what pigment you have available. If you had an orange in your toolbox of paints, I would be using a cadmium orange or whatever you have. Okay, so take a little bit of the cadmium yellow, add it to the red. Okay, and then we'll put that in here. A little bit wet. As you're discovering in the beginning of the course so far, your consistency of paint is absolutely crucial, and it's something you get used to over time. You learn to find what works best. So I encourage you to always have a rag, so you're kind of always drying the brush. We don't want to be too wet. We don't want to be too sticky. We want to be somewhere kind of a happy medium in between. Okay, so I'm going to get some more yellow into the mix here. So any instance where your red is going lighter, but it's still staying pretty colorful, you know, maybe on a piece of fruit or something, then you want to consider lightening it with yellow first. There's also nothing to stop you from combining these techniques. So you can see this is a very different kind of light red, whereas this is the red slowly losing its redness, going towards a lighter yellow. But you could also combine them. You know, it depends on what you're painting and what you're looking at. If it calls for it, put a bit of white in your analogous. But for this exercise, keep them distinct. I want to see what you know and what you can do by demonstrating that to me. Okay? So there's our cadmium reds gone light. All right. Now black, for the monochromatic, black will kill a color, meaning it really takes the color out of it and it goes dull and gray. This is actually dull too, but we don't notice it as much. So I'm going to do the analogous first, just so I can keep the purity of my terpenoid and cleaning the brush and all of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken it. Now remember, when red darkens on a color wheel, when it darkens via color, it heads toward purple. Now if you have a purple in your paint box, great. But it would be even better to have a red that's closer to purple. And as we've seen from the lecture so far, we have such a red. It's called alizarin crimson over here. I hope the camera's getting it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our cadmium and we're going to add to it a little bit of alizarin crimson. Okay, and let's put that down and see if that's dark enough. Probably not. Let's get a little bit. Let's clean that better. Okay. Again, we want to get the paint consistency. There we go. A little more workable. And then we add more alizarin. And we get even darker. And then kind of where I am now, it's pretty much pure alizarin. I had to go that much because I need to make these steps. And if I had cadmium in here, then it wasn't going to go dark enough. So I've pretty much gone to pure alizarin. So now, if we want to keep going towards a deeper, darker purple, we'd have to mix this up. So I'm at alizarin pretty much right now. So if I wanted to go darker with my alizarin towards purple, what color do you think we'd be adding to it? Well, if you guessed ultramarine blue, you're correct. So again, I'm not using purple because it wasn't in our required materials, but ultramarine blue was. And remember, ultramarine blue is the blue that's closest to purple. So we take a little bit of that, mix that in the mix. Now you want to make sure that you don't have any cadmium in the mix here anymore, because remember, we went to pure alizarin pretty much. Because cadmium's got orange. Orange is the opposite of blue, and we're going to get a dull color. So you always have just two colors. And at this point, the cadmium has dropped out. I've gone to pure alizarin. Now I need alizarin to get darker, so I'm going to ultramarine blue. Okay, so we just take maybe a little bit more into that, because we don't want to be mixing opposites. The thing with analogous colors is that they're really clean and pure, well, for the most part, compared to the browns of complements and compared to the grays and pastels of monochromatic. So they retain a lot of their chroma and hue. Okay, so that'll do. So that's red darkening towards purple and lightening towards orange or yellow. And then finally, to finish the monochromatic scale, we're going to take our red and we're going to add a tiny bit of black to it. And put that in there. Let's get a little bit more maybe. Just playing with the consistency again. And I think you can immediately see the effect. It's gone kind of brownish, kind of dull. And I add progressively more black. And so in this particular color, you can see that it's a bit like the complementary mixing, okay, because it goes towards brown-ish, but it's a very dull. So black does tend to kill a color, and what I mean by that is it takes out its chroma, its richness, kind of flattens it. And so if you are going to use black, ideally you would use transparent blacks, like ivory, for instance, ivory black. Not every brand ivory is transparent, but most of them are. And so a transparent black would darken without dulling it so much. Okay. So there we have. You can see this is kind of just dull and brown. This is kind of rich. Deep. Let's say you were going towards, I'll talk about it later also, you're painting a glass of wine or an apple that's red and you go dark. And I'm just going to come back in and get more alizarin in this mix because there's too much of the paper coming through. I got too much blue in there. You know, if you were painting, you know, an apple that's got a shadow, or a wine or a rose that's got a shadow on it, you would make more sense to be going with analogous mixing. Yeah, if you're painting pottery or bricks or something like that and your red's going darker, well, maybe you would go monochromatic. So it all depends on what you're painting. I'm just trying to even this out a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so I've completed the monochromatic and analogous chords, and you can see what I've had you do with the yellow and the blue is because yellow really doesn't get much lighter analogously, and blue doesn't really get much darker. I've had you combine the two yellows for these and likewise combine the two blues, whereas this is cadmium red light. Okay, so a little bit of a different procedure here. So we add the white to the yellow. We got these really nice pale pastel kind of yellows. And then look what happens when we add black. It's very interesting. It goes into these olive greens. So something most people wouldn't expect when you add black to yellow. If you want a darker yellow without necessarily changing into a color, refer back to our complementary painting where when we darken the yellow, it went slightly more browner. Okay, so here, you're going to actually darken it analogously in two directions because yellow can go two directions. It's the lightest color in the color wheel. You can head towards green and you can head towards orange. All right, so to head towards green, you would be using your blue that's closest to green, which is phthalo blue. And then to head towards orange, you'd be using your red, which is closest to orange, which is cad red light. Okay. For the blues, again, we add the white and we have the paler blues. In the monochromatic scale. And then we add black, and you can see pretty quickly it's black. There's not much more we can do. If we do it analogously, we're trying to push it towards purple, a really dark purple. So what we add is alizarin crimson. So alizarin into the mix, and we get this deep, deep dark purple. And then this is just a thicker version of this. So you really can't get much darker. And then to lighten the blue, we got slightly more green. So the trick with the analogous is that you can pick any color and see if you're going to lighten it, you go one way and use color. If you darken it, you go the other way and use color. And sometimes that's what you need in the painting. Sometimes that's what you need. Like I talked about the painting, the wine or the rose, this versus this. It all depends on what the painting needs. And most people by default go to these monochromatic approaches to darkening and lightening colors. So try not to do that. Try to consider the analogous. And when it's also, and another option for darkening would be the complementary. Okay, good luck with it all.